Welcome to Season 4 of the Empowering Women podcast, a production of the Empowering Women in Industry organization. Together, we will hear from ambitious and inspiring career women as they share their stories of success in overcoming career challenges. I'm Charlie Matthews, founder of Empowering Women, and I'm proud to introduce our host, Shannon Bumgarner from Filmspire.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to 2022. It seems so weird to actually really say that. Welcome to Season 4 of the Empowering Women podcast. I am super excited to be with you for my second season on the podcast. And as we go into 2022, I know many of us we're focused on what are our goals going to be, what are our intentions going to be for 2022, and what we really want to accomplish this year. So I thought, as people and as leaders, we're thinking about how are we going to develop our teams and how are we going to develop ourselves. And so I have a rock star guest today for you who is an expert and a thought leader in this space. Her name is Cherie Hicks. So Cherie, I am happy to call her my friend, but she also has an extensive background in leadership development, program design, facilitation, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion. She is a learning technology champion, so she's been in demand, as you can imagine, especially over the last couple of years. And she has a lot of experience in developing and implementing virtual learning strategies using a variety of different platforms. But to be honest, and the reason why I asked her to be here today is that another of Cherie's specialties is the women's leadership development programs. And I've had the pleasure of benefiting from her fantastic talents and programs. So, listeners, I promise you we're in great hands today. So, welcome, Cherie, to the podcast.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for having me. I'm
Absolutely.
looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, we're going to have fun today. It's going to be like Girls Hour, sort of like my December podcast. All right. So, Cherie, as you probably know, my favorite place to kick off the podcast is to explore your own stories. I'd love to start out with that question. So, just tell our listeners a little bit about you and your professional and personal story. Kind of what types of twists and turns in your journey brought you to this point.
Okay. So, Shannon, I started out my career wanting to be a social worker. That's what I went to college for. Somewhere about midway through, I changed it. I was like, oh, I want to be a counselor. I want to be a school counselor. And went to graduate school to be a counselor. And after that first year, I was like, I cannot do this. I need to pivot. And so I changed. I went into the adult education field because I consider myself an educator at heart. I'm all about growth and process improvement. And so that gave me that same opportunity to do that in a more general sense than, taking a deep dive like counseling would have been. So
I think you're still a counselor in chief sometimes in some of your programs based on what I've seen. So maybe those skills didn't go too far, right?
Yeah, I still get to use a little bit of that. And so I'm excited that I definitely have an opportunity to coach and counsel through my work that I do. But I've worked in a variety of different industries. I've been really fortunate to, be able to, the work that I do is really transferable. So, started in nonprofit, moved to for profit. I've worked in energy. Now I'm manufacturing, healthcare. I spent a good chunk of my career in healthcare, but really doing learning and development across those industries.
Was there a moment or maybe a project or a person that really kind of you said, I really like this whole adult learning thing?
Yeah, I would say in graduate school, I really didn't know what to expect. I was like, adult education? Like, what does that even mean? So it was meant to be just kind of an experiment. Let me take a class, let me see. And I really just like fell in love with like my professors, and I saw just the flexibility you had in the end, going down that path. So I would say graduate school really had an impact on me and my professors. And I have people to ask me a lot of times, like, well, how did you get into this field? Because a lot of times, people don't do what they went to school for. I was like, I literally went to school for it. And so I'm one of those few people that, like, I'm,
Yep.
working in the field that I went to school for. So yeah, I would say graduate school and my professors in graduate school solidified it for me.
Well, there you go. There's where, if there are any teachers listening, although I know that's not our normal audience, but if there's teachers listening, you're having an impact out there. So if you're having a bad day, I hope you're listening to us today.
Yeah,
And
there's a
I'm
lot of
glad,
power.
Cherie, that you turned into learning, adult learning, because so many of us have benefited from your talents. So speaking of that, you've spent quite some time, as you've indicated, in the leadership and organizational development space, and you have a passion for, and it really comes out. And at least within your company, are very well known for your work in women's leadership development, and honestly, even outside of the company, becoming a thought leader in this space. And so, the question I have from you is based on your experiences in this space. What do you think there's 2 or 3 leadership development areas that women can work on?
I would say being more of a strategic and critical thinker is one area. And then I would say focusing on enhancing your business acumen skills.
Hmm.
I think regardless of the field that you're in, I'm in HR. It's still important to know the business because the bottom line matters, and leaders want to know, okay, what's going to be my return on investment, even in leadership and learning and development. They want to know, like, how is that going to impact the bottom line? So understanding the business matters, and that's actually how you can build relationships as well and gain credibility and enhance your brand. But in addition to that, again, that strategic and critical thinking, you have to understand, like, how to actually create plans and then create actions that execute on those plans. And so I think that's really important, as in the leadership development field.
All I can say is amen, although I'm going to say a little bit more. I would say I totally agree, by the way, on the strategic thinking. I know you and I share that in
Yeah.
common. And one things I've really learned over the past, I'd say 6 months or so, is there's actually a video out on Empowering Pumps that I did around the Great Resignation, being called the Great Discontent. And that's really stealing the title from a Gallup article. But what really spoke to me in that article and doing that research is a lot of people connect to purpose. And it was my light bulb moment that if you're a leader out there and you don't have a strategy, and you've got to have that strategy and that vision and that purpose for people to connect to it. And it can't just be getting widgets out the door, or everybody feels good every day when they come to work. They got to know what they're driving for. Like, how are people connected? How are they making the world, their industry, a better place? How are they delivering that? And having that strategy and purpose is so incredibly important. And it can be a game changer in terms of your team's performance and your business performance. So I totally agree. And that's been one of my ahas. And honestly,
Yeah.
I think, a lot of women struggle. Probably a lot of
Mhm.
men leaders as well, but it's, I think, an all area we can grow in. On the
Yeah.
business acumen piece, I just happen to know this. Tell us a little bit more about how you've incorporated that into one of your programs, because I know you came up with a really unique idea with the
Mhm.
business simulation.
Mhm. So yeah, Shannon, you were helpful in the the implementation of a segment in one of my programs. Again, identifying that business acumen was an opportunity for improvement. I found an external vendor that offered simulations. That enhanced your business leadership skills, your business acumen skills, your business coaching skills by creating this. Like I said, it's gamification, really, where you run a business and you have executive leadership roles, and you run the business over the course of several years to make the business profitable. And so everything that's
And it's
involved in
stressful,
that.
by the way. So
Yes.
I participated in a pilot for this, and it is super stressful.
Yeah, it's stressful because it's definitely challenging because we typically try to put people outside of their comfort zone intentionally. So, like your procurement, if you're engineering, kind of like your background, you're not going to be in that role in the
Yep.
company.
She's gonna
We're going to
put you in
put
like
you
finance or something like that, and you're going like, what am
exactly.
I supposed to do with this?
Exactly. And so it's stressful and it gets competitive because
Oh yeah.
there are other businesses that are also starting up and you report out. But yeah, you're right. From that pilot that we did, it was so successful that we implemented it and have been running those simulations for 2 years now. And even when we converted to virtual, we were able to do it virtually and still have the same success that we had when we used to do it in person.
Yeah, and I know we're going to talk about this later, but I think for those out there considering like any kind of leadership development program, regardless of your target audience, I think this is a huge piece. We tend to focus on soft skills, and not that those aren't important, but we all have to be able to talk the language of business and understand the decisions we're making, the impact we're having on business, and how we can couch our ideas or propose our ideas using business terminology and how it impacts it from a hardline perspective. So I love both of those.
Yeah, and then Shannon too, as well as a part of a component of that simulation was you had to present.
Oh yeah, good
Um,
point. So that is soft skills. There you go.
yeah, so it's again, can you tell a compelling story
Mm,
about whether your successes and then sometimes your losses and getting that buy-in, and so that's the grand finale of it. And again, it's a lot from that simulations. It's really a lot of different skills that are enhanced through that experience.
yeah, absolutely. So if you're writing this down, audience, skills you might want to look at are strategic thinking. I totally agree. And then understanding the business of your business, whether if you're a business owner, you probably already do, but does your staff understand it? Does somebody 2 or 3 levels down understand it? And if you're in a larger company or a medium sized company, do you understand the business, the financials behind your business? So there you go. There's your 2 takeaways from that particular segment. So we're gonna transfer or transition a bit to my favorite conversation, which is the women's leadership development programs, and really why, quite frankly, I wanted to bring Cherie on because she is leading an award-winning suite of women's leadership programs at a really large company. So I'm going to start with the question of, can you describe the different programs you have at a high level, with obviously giving away anything confidential or proprietary? And then just curious, after you described that, how did you come up with that design? Like, what were your sparks or key indicators or drivers for that?
Sure. So there are a total of 4 programs. And the question that I get asked a lot is like, so what is the difference in the programs? Like, is
Right.
this the same thing? Why do you have 4 different programs? What are you doing? And it is very intentional the way it's designed to develop different skills and to target different audiences. So that is one of the key differentiators in those programs. So we have a program, the largest program that we started a couple years ago. Literally, we touch every woman across the organization, from the emerging leaders to the senior leaders. That program is meant to be more foundational. So, based on what group you fall in, whether you're an emerging, a mid, or a senior, you have different skills that you focus on. A couple of them I mentioned, like strategic
Right.
thinking
Yep.
and critical thinking.
And I have
Um,
to really quick here. This is a fully virtual program. I'm going to steal our thunder there for a second.
mhm,
But there was a third skill I'd like to add here that was in my work stream that I loved, which was agility. I
mhm,
think audience write that down, especially given what we've been through over the last 2 years. I'd
mhm.
put that right up there with those other two we talked about. So go ahead, Sheree. So
Yeah, that's a
yeah, they're
great point.
designed on different work streams. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely being agile is really important. And so that program is meant to be, self-paced, integrated into your work schedule, just kind of real time, learn when you can. But then we have other programs that are more high touch that take a deeper dive in quite a few areas. And one program is focused on what we consider a program you went through, Shannon, our key talent or high potential program. And with that program, there are a lot of different development components. So you have the mentoring, you have the executive coaching, you have an action learning project that you have to present
Which
to
is
the
really super stressful. So it takes that business simulation and puts it on steroids. So
yes,
just to
yes.
describe it, you literally get put in a team of women that you don't know, about 4 to 5 women in a team. You're generally from different either regions of the country and many times regions of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you get put usually with a business unit or a function that you know nothing about,
Mm-hmm.
and that you have a very short period of time, usually several months, to come up with a proposal to a true business problem that the company is facing. And
Yeah.
we do action on these projects, right? So you're not delivering like the end widget or thing. You're coming up with, here's what we think we should drive to as a company, and it's super stressful. But I will tell you, it's also very beneficial. And I'm still friends with my project team members today, Cherie. You know that.
Yes.
I still go in contact with them. I talk to them, not super frequently, but I do talk to them. So yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think through that challenging situation, a lot of times there are bonds that are made that are
Yeah.
long term connections because you went through this very stressful situation with this
Yeah,
group
they've
of
definitely seen me at
women.
my best and at my worst. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that definitely happens quite a bit. But like you said, Shannon, like you're solving for real problems. So these are not hypothetical case studies. You're creating a strategy to hand over to the business to implement. So that's another one of the programs. And then we have an emerging leader program because we saw an opportunity to really develop women earlier in their career or at more so a frontline level to prepare them for the key talent program. So with that program, there's a focus on, self-awareness, understanding, your strengths and then your opportunities for growth to prepare you for those senior roles in the future. And then the final program is really an online program that is for men and women. And
Hmm.
it's focused on gender equality because it is important to have allies in this journey to have gender equity in the workplace. So we want to make sure that we aren't excluding men, and that we do work with men to again try to build those relationships
Yep.
to enhance women's leadership development long term.
Yeah, so it sounds like some of the problems you're trying to solve for here were, in that I'm gonna call that emerging leader kind of high touch, was really how do we get that pipeline ready, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do
Mm-hmm.
we address some of the challenges there? With that program that I went through, I think it's those people who are in that high potential. How do you get their skill set so they can continue to develop into that executive leader that the company needs them to be? I
Yeah.
love the fully virtual program because it's so much more accessible. So those high touch
Mm-hmm.
programs, what she didn't mention, is usually a cohort's around 30-ish people, give or take a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. And so it really hits. Usually, I think you're hitting around like 4 to 500 a year. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Last year was our highest volume year, and it was over 500.
Yep.
So we've just in short time we went from a little over 100 to now we've quadrupled that. And you're right. The way that it is, the platform we use, it makes it more accessible to women outside of the US. It's offered actually in different languages. So again, we're trying to, meet people where they're at, and show them that you can still develop in a way that you maybe never expected. A lot of times we think, everything has to be in person or classroom based and high touch, but you can still develop virtually.
Yeah, you can. Well, we and a lot of us have to now, right?
Yeah,
Even I know the
now we have no
pandemic
choice.
still really I'll call it very fluid, but we still, in many ways, are still doing a lot of things virtually. So yeah,
Exactly.
I think, Cherie, this is a great segue into really one area I really want to focus on.
Hmm.
And that is, you and I have both been, I'm at the benefit, that's what I'm going to call it, of being in a larger organization that has the resources, both in terms of financial funding and then just people, to be able to deliver the suite that you talked about. But you and I both know that not everybody has that luxury.
Hmm.
So I'm just curious, what advice would you have for someone who might work for a smaller, medium sized company? Like, where can they start? Maybe what some things they can do when they don't have the benefit that you and I have had.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point, Shannon. And I would say one thing is to look at it from a perspective of, you have this great opportunity to really enhance your skill set in a variety of different areas in the learning and development field. I always tell people, I grew up it professionally in an organization that when I started at the time only had 250 employees. And so I always refer back to that company and that experience as the where I learned everything that I know and still use today because I had no choice. We were
Yep,
an
truth.
extremely small and mighty team. And so there are definitely advantages. Less red tape. You can, experiment more, and at the time that I went through that, it wasn't actually as many free resources as they are today or inexpensive resources. You're right. We are fortunate. We're at a larger company. But that's been like really my most recent experience. Most other organizations I work for were much smaller. And we still were able to offer quality programming through, partnership with local vendors. Now you have a lot of online resources. You have TED Talks. You have like local development organizations. As you know, I'm a part of a professional development organization. And people are always trying to, partner with you, get their name out there, and they're willing to do stuff, free or discounted by giving them a chance. What I love that I've been able to do, even though I'm a part of a larger organization, is to give smaller vendors an opportunity.
I
And it's
love
led
that.
to significant cost savings. One of the programs, the Emerging Leader Program, I was able to have the money to in the budget to implement that program because I changed vendors and use less expensive vendors who turned out to be amazing
Oh, wow.
and that I'm still working with a couple of years later. But because I work with local vendors instead of the big name vendors, I was able to create a whole new program. So,
Yeah.
a lot of advantages there. So I would say, definitely look locally, and, maximize the online resources, YouTube,
Yeah.
TED Talks, LinkedIn.
One of my personal favorites, TED
Yeah,
Talks.
I know. I have a TED Talk champion here. But
Yeah.
yeah, those are quality resources. So yeah, there's advantages. So don't feel as if you have to have a big budget to offer quality
Yeah, and I would
programming
say
because you
there's
don't.
one thing that I've been so impressed with you that I think can carry over no matter the size of the organization. That is, figure out a pain point, and it could be more than one. But if you're in a small or mid-sized company, what is that one goal that your company has related to leadership development, whether it be women's leadership development or something different? What is that one pain point or goal, and how can you cultivate something that gets you towards
Hmm.
that goal? And it sort of gets back to where we started, Shree, which is strategic thinking, right? Like,
Yeah,
how are you fitting into the strategy or a pain point in the business? Because as you know, it's much easier to talk about return on investment if you're linked into that strategy. And if
exactly.
you've got to know the strategy of the business in
Yeah.
order to make that connection. So that sort of gets back into the business acumen as well that Sheree mentioned out on the outset.
Yeah, Shannon, that's an excellent point. As far as understanding the pain points, and another thing that I hear, like people don't know where to begin. Like, Like, what do I talk about? Like, what should the program be about? And guess what? Your target audience will let you know.
They
It is
will.
less complicated than you think. You can easily do a survey, and people will tell you what they want to learn, what is important to them. You don't have to figure it out all by yourself. And so that's how you create relevant, impactful programming is look at the learners as, the voice of your customers. They're your
I love
customers,
that.
and they'll tell you what their needs are. You just have to be open to hearing it, because it changes. And so, getting that feedback. And so in our field, we have to look at to be successful, I think, and remain relevant and show again that return on investment. We have to really collaborate with our customers to create a this
Hmm.
safe place for them to give us the honest feedback. And Shannon, our relationship, just besides you, like, we started off with you being a participant. That I've worked with you to give me feedback on designing, making changes. You've mentored for the new program, and you started out though really like as my customer, and it's evolved over time. And I would just say, I mean, that's possible, anytime any program is, that really keep your ear to the ground with your needs of the learners.
Yeah, I was going to tell you we took the same advice. So that really high profile, high potential talent, Cherie actually used customers like myself to help her redesign the program a bit. I think about a year or so into your tenure of having the
Mm-hmm.
program. And then
Mm-hmm.
the second piece, you just alluded to it, but I want to make sure the audience hears this is the connectivity between the programs. So, which I mean, you may not know about the timeline, is it really started with that high potential executive program that they hit about 30 ish women a year. But these other programs are now tied in connectivity. So, you want to just talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's so important.
Sure. Yeah. To understand the method to my madness. Uh,
Exactly.
like I said, I think it's connected to again that question that I get, like, well, what is the difference in all these programs? And is it, duplication? And there's not. So the new program, the emerging leader program that I created, I intentionally reached out to alumni from the Key Talent program to mentor women in the emerging leader program, because these are women who have, are further along in their career, so they, have a variety of experience, but then they've been developed. I know they had been mentored, so they had picked up some best practices and could really be a great introduction into how development can support your career goals. And
Yep.
so that's where that connect. Like I tell a lot of people that go to my programs, like, this won't be the last time you hear from me.
And
I will,
she's right.
I will invite you back to be guest speakers, because it's like storytelling is a powerful tool. And so, who better to hear it from than the women that, have gone through the experience, that, are now leaders that have been successful more so than myself. And so, I'm constantly connecting the programs using the more senior level women to either mentor or be guest speakers, or, provide feedback. And so they can see that connectivity, because I'm really trying to create this network of women that are supporting each other, so you have resources. It's this community feel. So you're
Yep.
not feeling as if, like, there's barriers or silos. You can reach out to any woman, whether you went through the program together or not, because, oh, this she told me about another program that I would have never considered. And and now you're already looking at your next development opportunity. So it's really the gift that keeps on giving as far as connecting participants in the program.
Yeah, I'm going to tell a funny story here, Cherie, just to make our audience laugh. So, for our high potential high talent program this year, so they have a formal graduation ceremony. prior to the ceremony, they present to executive leaders their action learner project outcomes. It's a really way to highlight all the great work that they've done. And then at the end, like as in any graduation, they have a keynote speaker, and I had the privilege of doing it this past year. But the funny part of the story is it's obviously virtual because we're trying to be safe in the company. And I've prepared. I have an inspiring story ready, but I log on and I'm expecting some of the executive leaders maybe to hung around, but I'm really expecting more of, some of the strong supporters of the program and obviously other graduates. And I log on to the particular meeting, that virtual meeting that we have, and there's a CEO right in there in the middle, and I was like, wow, oh, he's gonna drop in a second, no big deal. No, he doesn't drop. He stays on through the entire presentation. So I guess my point in that story is that when you do these kind of programs and you cultivate them in your world, you never know what the outcome or benefit is going to be. And it is, like Cherie said, it's the gift that keeps on giving. Although I have to admit, I gave her a hard time when that was over. I pinged her and I was like, really, Cherie? That's not what I was expecting, but okay. But the point really, and I'm telling that story, although it's real and jest, it does give a lot of benefits long term.
Yeah,
I
it
would say,
does.
go ahead, Cherie.
No, I was just going to say it does because you made me think about one thing I hadn't mentioned is the visibility
Oh,
that you
true.
get to leadership. And, I believe in that. That's one of my goals as far as always keeping those connections is to give you visibility into opportunities that you may not normally have. And that one for you, I know, gave you some visibility and that I think, had, maybe somewhat connected to some opportunities that came afterwards.
Yep.
And it's important. Like we have to think again, going back to the strategic thinking, being mindful of, okay, who the decision makers are in these meetings. If I come into this meeting and then I come in as a subject matter expert, guess what? They remember that. And
Yeah,
Shannon,
because
you're
the truth is, I don't interact with a CEO on a daily basis. Let's just put it that way.
yeah.
So he, up until that particular presentation, he probably had very little impression of me, good or bad.
Hmm.
And that is probably one of the few impressions he has of me right now, just because in my current role, it's not an interaction I would have. So to your point, it was a great opportunity for him to have an opinion of me he may not have had before. And in that particular venue, it wasn't a business conversation, but it was a storytelling conversation. And can I hold an audience and can I communicate?
Mm-hmm. And it was so inspiring, Shannon, and it showed the women that were going through the experience you had been through, like this is the potential long term. Look, because you were telling your leadership story and what had come out of that, and to see someone that was on the other side of that and that had been successful, is really inspiring. But then you as the speaker, for you to again get an opportunity to have a platform and continue to develop in that way is really rewarding work to see those connections. And I get to
You get to
continue to
benefit from that,
yeah,
right?
'cause I get to see kind of how the story ends a lot of times.
Yeah,
And
that's a good point.
yeah, it is really rewarding.
Yeah, I'm going to pitch something really quick here. And Cherie was part of this journey with me. So if you are at a smaller mid-sized company, one of the things, and we stole this shamelessly from another large company, and it's been out there for a little bit, but peer coaching circles. If you don't have much budget, you don't have many people, this is something you can easily do. Really, the concept is that you get a smaller group of women, probably 10 to 15. If you're able to do that, you can't obviously do it virtually. I will admit that the in person connection is better, but we've all learned and technology's gotten better in the last few years. But you really, to some use some earlier points from Cherie, you get that group together. You first of all get voice of the customer. Where do you want to learn and where do you want to grow? And you tailor that content around that. You generally meet on a monthly basis, so it's not a huge commitment. And you facilitate, the best I've seen, you typically facilitate and rotate the leadership position in that particular session. So like Cherie might take it 1 month, and then I take it the next month, and somebody else takes it the next month. And that way the burden is not on the same person to develop the content or the program for that particular session. But then kind of getting back to your point about free resources, you take like, I don't know, being able to raise your voice, for example, elevate your voice at the table. You go find TED Talks or books or articles. And it's better to make it interactive where you can. But my point is that is a very cheap and, quite frankly, very powerful way to
Mhm.
start connection amongst a smaller group of women. And then you can take it and start splitting and have a lot more circles if it's a concept that works and sticks with where you are. You can feel free to reach out to me if you ever want to start that. I'm happy to help you kind of figure that out. But that's a small way. And I know Cherie and I really enjoyed that together with some
Yeah.
other women at the company.
Yeah, we definitely did. And I think, Shannon, what you speak to, and again, I'm going back to graduate school. One of the things that I learned when I got into the field of adult learning that just was kind of like one of those aha moments was to really have a powerful or impactful, if you're want to develop something like that, make it learner centric, because guess what? As adults, they typically have these really fascinating life experiences,
Hmm.
and they have resources that all they need is just like an opportunity to have those conversations. So it's really more so an exchange.
Yep.
And traditionally in the education field is more so all roads lead to the teacher or the instructor. But in adult learning, when you look at the adult learning principles, that's one of the principles, is that you consider the learner's experiences, because they most likely they know something about something that is valuable to whatever you're teaching or whatever the development opportunity is. And I think the peer coaching circles are that kind of platform that really shows that. It's like the perfect situation to
Good
show
point.
how you learn from each other. A lot of times we think, oh, I have to have this expert and I have to spend this money. That is literally one of those experiences where, wow, we can learn from each other. We
Yeah, and
can,
we, by the way,
look
we
at
had
each
no
other.
budget. I think we might have
Mhm,
taken part of our ERG budget for the first meeting for lunch, but that was it. Aside from that,
mhm.
there was no cost involved other than a conference room and whatever virtual, either
Yeah,
Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever you have
yeah.
access to, and that literally is your only cost.
Mhm. Yeah, again, it takes no money. Like you said, lunch, and now we're having virtual lunches. So,
Yeah, good point. So bring your
so
own lunch to that one, right? Unless you do like a Grubhub card or something.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, really, I mean, that's some of the feedback. I was actually just looking at in the program survey, and I just always see that consistently, is that people appreciate or want more of opportunities to talk to each other, to learn from each other. And again, it goes back to like the foundations of adult learning. Like that's one of the principles, is because we have those life experiences as adults. We want to talk about them. We want to share. We want to try to help make each other better. And I see that it shows up constantly.
Yep. Well, I really want to pivot and do one more topic really quickly before we end. So, Cherie is on the local board for the Association for Talent Development. Hopefully, I got that correct.
Yes.
I just wanted to give it a shout out here because it's that potential area for free resources. So that was the first
Mhm.
reason. But the second reason is a little selfish. So I know you get some great board experience and it can help you in all different avenues of your life. So just tell our audience a little bit about how that came about for you and maybe something you've learned along that journey.
Oh yes. I, I think it was definitely part of like a development for myself. That's how I joined the local chapter, because they host monthly development sessions.
Okay.
So you can network, you can develop. But moving to the board, was, I think, for me, really like this stretch assignment as far as development, professional
Finally, you
development.
gave one to yourself rather than giving it to the rest of us.
Exactly, exactly. Hey, I try to, practice what I preach. I'm definitely a lifelong learner. I feel like, we're all a work in progress. So I want to always make sure I'm challenging myself because I feel like it helps me to be better. Like when I'm on that other side, like it helps me to have more compassion, and grace when it comes to participants in my program. But moving to the board definitely has been, really rewarding experience. Now I'm, heading into year 2. So I'm just like, oh, I can't play, the new card anymore. And I intentionally took a position on the board, in an area that I didn't have a lot of experience in.
Hmm.
And I felt like was an opportunity for growth, and that was marketing. Um, and I'm constantly learning. Like I'm
I
just,
love that. So you not
yeah,
only took the stretch assignment to be on the board to gain the experience of what is that like, but then you said, "Hey, let me sign up for a function that I don't really know much about."
yeah, yeah. And so, you want to talk about, flexing that strategic thinking, critical thinking muscle. Well, being on a board does that because you're
Hmm.
constantly planning. You're looking at how to increase your membership, how to retain your membership. It's definitely a different level of it's a business, and like, we're looking at the money. It's almost like that business simulation you went
Hmm.
through, that we're working together as a group to make our chapter successful. And yeah, again, I feel like I'm constantly learning. I actually went to a conference of other board members last year, and just was just sitting there like in awe. Just I'm a sponge, so I was just taking it all in. So just hearing from these people that had, worked on boards and understanding their best practices. It's I feel like what I've learned is really transferable to the work that I do, and it just, continues again to make me better in my role, and, challenge me in ways that, I may not get, just kind of from my day-to-day job. And I think it's important to have that external awareness.
Hmm.
um,
Good
and that
point.
was one of my goals. I feel like as a leader, you need that to, always be benchmarking, so you don't start believing your own hype. Like, okay, I think we're doing a pretty good job, but how do you know unless you, really kind of look outside of your business? And so that's just a natural platform that provides that constantly. Like, what are other great things? What are things that are great that other companies are doing?
Yeah, and
Um,
that's, obviously I'm sure you're learning a lot on the board, but that's just being a member as
Mhm.
well, right?
Yeah, being a member,
Yep.
and that's how I started. And and at the on the board level, it's like, how do we create a strategy where we make sure we're doing that for people? So
Right.
it's like the next level of, we're trying to be intentional about creating that. So yeah, it's been a great experience.
So, Cherie, I hate to say this, but our time together has almost come to a close. But I want to tie something for the audience here as we close. So, in December, I interviewed Wendy Goebel, who is my closest friend and is part of my personal board of directors, speaking about board. But I also brought Cherie intentionally in January, not because of just the women's leadership experience, but she is another member of my personal board of directors. So, I would like to end with think about that as you're going into 2022. Who is on your personal board of directors? Because they give you a great diversity of perspective. They will challenge you, and they will support you when you're crazy enough to try a career pivot that most people don't. Um, so I just wanted to point that out really quick, Cherie. And as we
Mhm.
end, if people want to add you to their network, where can they find you?
Sure, they can find me on LinkedIn. So Cherie with a C, on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Yep.
Yep, and Cherie's fantastic. She can give you some great advice if you're trying to start that own development program. So,
Yeah.
from the bottom of my heart, Cherie, thank you for giving me more of your time today. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you thinking of me, and I always love an opportunity to have a conversation just about the work that I do, but then the partnership that we've had, like when I started some of this work, like from the very beginning. So you've been on this journey with me, and I think it speaks to what you said as far as this board of directors, and how with the support, how we support each other and then take each other to that next level professionally. So yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. And here's to taking your career and your personal life to the next level. I'll see you again in February. Bye, everybody.